ワンピースは実在する。
俺はモンキー D ルフィ、お前らを超えて海賊王になる男だ。
人の夢は終わらねえ。
Welcome
to Nerdville.
We'll never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious.
Hey there, fellow nerds. I'm Turtles.
And I'm Fanfi. As you saw on the thumbnail, we have an idea on how Ginny and Bonney might be one and the same.
What?
Kuma's backstory is finally looking up, as we saw in the end of the previous chapter, as well as getting more info on the mystery man himself, Monkey D. Dragon.
This week's cover page is all about Kuma and Ginny, as Kuma is fishing in a river trying to get some salmon for him to eat, as we see some of the bullies in the background. Also, a little bit of a spoiler on how Kuma and Ginny look a little bit later on.
This chapter continues Kuma's backstory 8 years after the God Valley incident. We see a panel of the church he started living in, with a castle in the distance, as elderly people who knew his father and mother ask for his help. We knew in chapter 1095 that Kuma was born in the Sorbet Kingdom, but the fact that the villagers remember his father as a very kind person, saying they used to come here, referring to the church, insinuates that his father was also a pastor, or at least worked in the church. This shows us that the Buccaneers might not only be practitioners, but preachers themselves, and that this might be the tradition passed down through the Buccaneer line, preaching the good deeds of Nika and helping as many people as possible. Kuma is now a pastor and 17 years old. We see him treating an elderly woman, similarly to how he removed Luffy's pain in Thriller Bark. He seems to be helping all of the elders with their aches and pains. The old folk thank him, asking if he would be available on weekdays. Suddenly, someone stomps on the floor yelling that he will only be available on Sundays. It's interesting to think about the comparisons we can make with Christian traditions. A first comparison would be Kuma taking care of these individuals on a Sunday, which as we know is the day in the week where most people go to church. Secondly, the fact that Kuma appeases people's pain to then take it himself is equivalent to a priest having to take a sinner's confession and having to take that pain and not share it with anyone. The person who suddenly arrived is Ginny, now 21 years old. She states that they are just a bunch of freeloaders. They respond saying that they got her attention now, and that they will overlook her foul mouth, because she is a cutie pie, as they gossip about all her suitors. She sighs and tells them not to change the subject. Two of them exclaim that these men have no chance with Kumachi being around. Kuma charmingly tells them they are too kind, as Ginny angrily tells him he is too kind. As they prepare to leave, they apologize for not being able to donate to Kuma due to the tribute to the Celestial Dragons, adding that it's because of the new king.
They describe the king as cold and cruel, and only concerned about paying the Celestial Dragon tribute, even mentioning that he doesn't feed his prisoners, as one exclaims that they knew someone that died that way. They mention that he's even more of a cheapskate than Ginny herself. Kuma, sensing their anger, tells them that they can come every week to get rid of their mild pains. They thank him for his assistance as they part ways. He returns inside of the church, walking towards the paw bubble. Kumachi takes a deep breath, then places his hands on the paw. Immediately, Kuma absorbs all the pain. His face cringes and he bleeds, screaming in agony. Ginny waits for it to end, covering her face with her legs. This explains her anger earlier, when they asked if they could come more often, since Kuma is taking all of their pain every week as she watches. Obviously, we have seen this situation before, in one of the most epic moments in One Piece.
何もなかった。
where Zoro took on Luffy's accumulated pain from Thriller Bark. Zoro must have really won Kuma's respect when he did that, since Kuma has been doing this himself for years probably. Perhaps Thriller Bark was the first instance of Kuma seeing something of Nika in the Straw Hat crew. We mentioned earlier what Kuma does is taking people's pain away, then taking the pain himself. You could tie this to the act of self-flagellation practiced by clergymen. This is the act of inflicting pain upon oneself to share in the crisis pain. In that case, what clergymen are trying to achieve is sharing the burden of taking the sins of all humans like Jesus did. You could say Kuma does something similar by taking all their sins, here represented as aches and pains. Ginny takes care of Kuma so he can recover. She tells Kuma that they have no idea what he's doing for them, and that he's doing it week after week. Kuma says that someone has to take all that pain. He also apologizes for causing her pain, and tells her that he will become stronger. Ginny retorts that's not the point. Kuma changes the conversation, mentioning that he got food today. Both joyfully joyfully enjoy their food. The backstory continues 5 years later, where we see the church as Ginny says to Kumachi, "Let's get married." Kuma, flustered, responds, "We can't." Ginny, annoyed, says, "What kind of reaction is that?" As well as, "You love me, right? Admit it, you dope." Continuing with, "Wouldn't that make you happy?" Kuma supposed it would, thinking to himself what his father said that day when they got enslaved, wondering if she would be happy with him.
Quick thing everyone, thanks for getting us over 130 subs. If any of you haven't subscribed yet, how about you give it a whirl? And don't forget to smash that like button.
Do it.
Kuma, reading the paper, tells Ginny to look, since they have wanted posters of the Freedom Fighters, aka the Revolutionary Army. A poster of Dragon is revealed, as Kuma exclaims he is so cool, like a hero. As someone knocks on the door asking if anyone is home, Kuma opens, and it's the bullies we saw in the previous chapter, calling Ginny their muse, bringing them some fish. As Kuma thanks them for the food, Ginny throws a dish at him, following up with calling him an idiot and sighing. For you dopes out there, Ginny is obviously angry since Kuma doesn't realize that they are not here because they are friendly, but because they are interested in her. Another time skip occurs, where we are 3 years later, or 22 years from the present day, in Castletown. Kuma is yelling at the guards to let go of the people they have kidnapped. The guards tell him that he is a big oaf, and that he is committing treason. People in the crowd mention that he is a pastor located in the south. A guard smirking at Kuma explains that there is a new law, allowing them to do anything to the south. Kuma, shocked, infers that they plan on enslaving the southerners, as he releases a massive stating he can't let it happen. We cut to the king being informed that the people find the new policy is hard to swallow. The king answers that this won't have any consequences, and people will just have to get used to it, adding that they will resent the southerners in no time. The king explains here that the borders of the kingdom will stop at the northern province, to reduce the country's population and by extension the celestial tribute. The next panel is Kuma in jail with other prisoners, as he asks what did they do to be arrested as well. It's Ginny and the bullies, as she explains that they raised hell to get him out, as a bully adds that they got their ass kicked. Kuma expresses his concerns about the future of this kingdom to Ginny, as she tells him the king is only a puppet of the celestial dragons, and the policy came from them. Out of nowhere, a massive explosion occurs in the royal palace. Two shadows appear, obviously one being Ivankov, the other Dragon, adding, "You make me sick." The next panel reveals that the Sorbet kingdom was liberated as people celebrate. Dragon mentions that Kuma went on a rampage, as Eva exclaims you will love him. As they open the door, Eva yells out, "Ginny, Kuma, you got caught!" The pair is shocked at seeing him again. Eva asks Kuma if he is still the same and wants to join them to change the world. Finally, we get to see Dragon, where he looks just as he did during the Vegapunk backstory on Ohara. We get to see Ginny and Kumachi joining the Revolutionary Army. The narrator confirms the timeline by stating it was the tragedy of Ohara and the start of the Great Pirate Era which led to the creation of the Revolutionary Army, and that Eva and Dragon were the figureheads of the army until Kuma joined in as a third.
Dragon explains that they currently lack funds, so they can only act like mercenaries and help where rebellions are already taking place. He adds that all recruits must go through a weapons training, and that the long-term goal is to have a boundless army around the world. As the group sails, Kuma asks Dragon how does he know so much about weapons. Dragon answers that he has spent some time with the Navy, but unfortunately didn't find justice there. Eva chimes in with, "Marine or revolutionary, Dragon wants to help others." Here we get insight on who Dragon is, and unsurprisingly, he is Garp's son. The fact that he shares Garp's values on helping people and on the concept of justice.
あんなゴミくずにか
As he mentions, he was once part of the Marines, even if it was short-lived. It begs the question if Garp pushed him to do so, like he did with Luffy, or was he just simply inspired by his father's view on justice? Dragon is an evolution of Garp. Garp wants to help people within the current system. Dragon realized or discovered that this isn't possible, and does what Garp couldn't do, and create an alternative to the status quo. Dragon is shown as more than a potential powerhouse, expressing efficient use of resources, big dreams, and a strategic mind. You can also see that at his core, he's a Marine, with a drill sergeant attitude about him. I wonder why. Kuma proclaims to Dragon that he can count on him, as the fearless leader tells him that he won't regret it. This is followed by a panel of Kumachi saying that he will come home once in a while. The last part of the chapter happens 14 years from now. A soldier tells Ginny that she seems very excited, where we see Ginny has become a captain of the Revolutionary Army's Eastern Forces. She answers answers. Is it that obvious? Can you blame me though? Ginny explained that she can't wait to be reunited with Kuma, as the soldier exclaims that Captain Kuma is a lucky dog and won the heart of the woman they admire. Ginny is obviously creeped out by that statement. The chapter ends at the revolutionary headquarters in Baltigo, where Dragon is urgently called with the revelation that Ginny has been captured.
What Turtles and I first talked about at the end of this chapter was, where is Bonney? Since Ginny is currently captured, we assume that she will meet a tragic end in the next chapter. It would have made sense in the timeline of events for Bonney to have been born in this chapter before Ginny was caught. Now Oda could be just teasing us as usual and does not want to show us everything, or is keeping it for a Bonney specific backstory. But Ginny did propose, which is a significant event. So why would Oda be keeping their marriage and family dynamic from the viewers? Bonney is currently 24 years old, allegedly, and would line up perfectly with the moment Ginny proposes, since it happened 25 years ago, and Bonney would be born a year later. It is not confirmed that Kuma and Ginny are married in this chapter. Even when the fellow rebellion soldiers are talking about how lucky Kuma is, they don't say that he is so lucky to have her as a wife, but rather that he is lucky to have won her heart. On top of all of this, when Ginny proposes to him, he isn't opposed to the idea of it because he doesn't feel the same way, but because he is fearful of what could happen to her and their future child, as they would also be buccaneers and subject to the same discrimination as he was. It is more likely that Ginny is currently perhaps pregnant with Bonney and will give birth to her before tragedy strikes, leaving Kuma with the responsibility of raising their daughter. However, we feel that something just smells fishy here. It could be because of Bonney's age fruit and that she is not really 24, so the timeline is wrong perhaps, but we had an idea. What if Ginny and Bonney were actually the same person?
What the hell you say?
No, don't leave. You made it this far. All joking aside, all that we spoke previously is what is pointing us in that direction. The fact that also Bonney does not look like a buccaneer. She has no apparent traits from this race. Increased strength, durability, height. She would only be a quarter buccaneer, but she should still show some traits from this race. Also, when J. Garcia Saturn is talking about the buccaneers to Bonney, it seems like he was speaking to Kuma specifically and not her, stating he was born to be a slave. This seems to be excluding Bonney as a buccaneer. Also, as we said previously, Kuma seems to be concerned about the idea of having children. So it might be possible that Kuma has been stonewalling Ginny for years. We have two main explanations on how Ginny and Bonney might be one and the same. Number one, we know that the age fruit can manipulate your own age as well, and that Kuma's fruit has the potential to extract certain memories from individuals. Perhaps for some reason that will be revealed in the next chapter, Ginny had to de-age herself for some reason, and Kuma had to extract her own memories. The how doesn't make too much sense here since we're lacking information, but this would be devastating to Kuma as he would have to raise the woman that he loves as his own daughter. The second reason is that we know that Bonney has spent a lot of time as a child on Egghead Island. Bonney could simply be a clone of Ginny. If Ginny does indeed die in the next chapter, perhaps Kuma sold his soul to the government to bring her back as a clone, given all the tragedies he has suffered. Or the more likely situation is that the world government asked Vegapunk to clone her, giving them a Seraphim test subject while having leverage on Kuma to create an army of buccaneer super soldiers, the pacifist says. The fact that she might be leveraged is reinforced by Garcia stating in chapter 1089 Kuma's daughter has no longer any use. This could give us a reason as why Kuma had Vegapunk promise to never reveal the truth to Bonney, as learning that she is a clone or not really Kuma's daughter, as well as being the reason for him being enslaved, would be devastating to her. The fact that the previous chapter was called Kumachi and this chapter is called Ginny points us in the direction that the next chapter might be called Bonney. So our questions will be answered soon.
This is our review of chapter 1097 of One Piece. What do you think of our idea of Ginny potentially being Bonney or becoming her as a clone? Or is she actually their daughter as we all originally thought? Let us know in the comments below. Positive or negative, we need the engagement.
If you want to learn about how the Gorosei, Imu, and Guarding could potentially have fruits representing the 7 princes of hell, click in this video right here. See you next time.
Peace out!